Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today it is part 1 of my mid-season power rankings for the 2021 season of the Overwatch League. With 2 tournaments down, we are now officially halfway through the season with 2 more tournaments to go, plus the playoffs. But for now, this is going to be where I place the teams now that we are halfway through the season. Once again, it'll be all 20 teams, and this will be the 20 through 11 video. Now we've had some cross-regional play. We kind of know where teams match up against each other, how they stack up against each other. We have a better idea of where teams are. Now, my opinions, of course, have changed since May, so don't be surprised if a team has some kind of major jump or major drop. It can happen. Obviously, we have a pretty small sample size still for how these teams are, and so there's a lot of volatility week in and week out, especially with tournament performances and stuff like that for how well I rate a team. So be warned that that is a thing. And of course, these are my opinions, so they may differ from yours. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below your own rankings, whether or not you agree or disagree with anything that I have. But let's not delay any further. Let's get into this. Let's start with the number 20 spot. And that number 20 spot belongs to the Los Angeles Valiant. Not really a big surprise when you think about the fact that this team has won 2 maps all season. They've been struggling a lot, but they did finally manage to get a map win over the Philadelphia Fusion, which of course created a time ripple that completely created a butterfly effect that changed the entire course of history, but we'll get to that later. The LA Valiant still seem like the weakest team in the Overwatch League. You know, I actually think there was a possibility, depending on what happened in North America, that I could have seen the Valiant move up to the 19 spot, but at the end of the day, I saw some kind of improvements from some of the teams that I was a little bit more concerned about, so the Valiant stay down here at 20. Still don't look all that great. Still have players playing off roles. They're not playing their best heroes a lot of the time because of that. They don't look super well coordinated. They look like they definitely are putting in their all. They're putting in the effort. They want to win. But unfortunately, based on the results that we've seen from them, it is not working out in their favor. And so they are down here at 20 as my worst team in the Overwatch League. At number 19, I have the Vancouver Titans. This past month was not good to the Titans. They lost their main tank, Shredlock. They replaced him with Chongsik. And basically what we've been stuck with ever since is a Vancouver Titans team that has just not really looked all that well coordinated. They definitely improved going into the second set of matches they played in the June Joust qualifiers. I thought putting Dalton in over Linkser was a good change. I thought he changed the way they played. I thought they managed to kind of get the team looking better. And so I think there's definitely a big improvement here from this Titans roster from that first batch of games in the June Joust. The second batch of games, they've kept some of that same kind of strong performances that we've seen at times from this team back in the May Melee. We've seen some of that start to come back, and they've shown a little bit more promise to me than the Valiant, but I did drop them from 18 to 19 because the performances they had early on just were not very good, and the overall level of this team I don't think is getting that much better over time, whereas I think a lot of these other teams around them have done stuff to improve, but I still think they've looked better than the Valiant. I think they've put more together than the Valiant so far, and for that reason, I have them here at 19. At number 18, I have the London Spitfire. They are up a spot from the last power rankings. They were at 19 in the May Melee. They actually looked somewhat improved. They looked like they had some level of competence, and they definitely have looked like they've started to adapt more to being able to play multiple different compositions. They don't look like they are a team that can only kind of run that one type of Reinhardt compositions that we would have expected of a European team. They've shown a little bit of flexibility. They still don't look incredible, but I also gave them this position ahead of the Vancouver Titans, mainly because I think that this team has the better chance of winning when those two teams go head-to-head, though it'll be a while before they actually play against each other. And the London Spitfire got a bit of a blessing with Sparker now joining this roster, finally turning 18. He is now playing on this roster. You know that they are committed to playing Sparker, as Hybrid has been moved to the two-way role that Sparker was previously fulfilling. Hybrid is now playing on both the British Hurricane and presumably the London Spitfire as well, should the need arise. Sparker's a very talented player. I think he will bring a lot of very strong hit scan play to this team, and so I think they benefit a lot from a new player coming in. We saw last year when Sparkle came into the Paris Eternal, he kind of rejuvenated that roster and really kind of led them to that great surge going into the Summer Showdown. I don't expect Sparker, of course, to be the exact same level of player as we got from Sparkle, but I think that's a huge addition to this team. I think he will do a lot to improve the team. I just realized that I was talking about Sparker and Sparkle, and if I'm not clear enough, people may get those confused. Obviously, two different players, but big addition for them with Sparker coming of age. I've seen some improvements for this team. I still don't feel confident in them winning many games, but I certainly think their chances are better now that they have Sparker. At number 17, I have the Guangzhou Charge. The Guangzhou Charge had a very, very interesting June Joust qualifiers. It is a team that managed to win a game over the NYXL and then lose to the other teams that they played. I don't know how to feel about this Charge roster. They don't inspire a ton of confidence in me when I watch them play. Their coaching staff is still a mystery. They just recently got rid of Neko as their coach. He was kind of the only assistant that they had remaining from the Arachne coaching staff. And they promoted the coach from their academy team, Extra, to be an assistant coach. So he's not their head coach. He's an assistant coach. So presumably they're still looking for a new head coach. And so I don't really know what's going on with this team. I have a lot of concerns about how well this team is going to be able to do in hit scan dominant metas. Mike Haley has not seen much playtime. When he has played, he has not looked particularly strong. There's obviously possibilities they find someone in contenders, or even some of these rumored players that may be getting traded from other teams could potentially land on this Charge roster. But right now, I don't feel great about this Charge roster. They have some issues, and I think that they're just looking to be an overall pretty weak roster. Their tank line's been okay at times, but they've definitely not looked as good as it did last season. I think a lot of that comes down to you lose some very talented players like Shu and Happy that really elevated the rest of this roster. Without them, I don't think they look as solid, and so for me, they end up here in the 17 spot. At number 16, I have a team that may be a bit of a surprise to some people. I have the Toronto Defiant. This is a team that had a very strong May Melee, but they did not look very good in the June Joust. Now, some of that could come down to the fact that this team had a COVID issue. I don't want to call it necessarily an outbreak, because it was only 2 players, to my knowledge, that were impacted. But they did get hit with COVID. They did lose Hisu and Logix for a time. They brought in Aspire from Contenders, who looked pretty good, but ultimately this team was unable to get many wins on the board. The only team they beat, if I recall correctly, was the London Spitfire. They are a roster that I think has been kind of exposed for what they really are. They're not as strong as I think people had thought they were after the May Melee. Their May Melee schedule was pretty easy, and I think that led to a lot of people thinking they were going to be a kind of top-level team in North America, but it appears as if they have not been that team people thought they were, and so they are here on my list in the 16 spot. I definitely think they could and should move up. I think they're a team that should 100% look to add another DPS player. If they want to be a mostly Korean roster, they should add a Korean DPS player. I'm sure there's some out there in Contenders who they could bring in. There's possibly some free agents as well, but I definitely think that's their biggest weak point right now. It's the place where they don't look as comfortable, and so if they were to do that, I think they would have a better chance at being one of your better rosters in North America. But for now, they fall here in the 16 spot. At 15, I have quite possibly the hardest team to place in this entire power rankings, the New York Excelsior. Yes, the NYXL did make the June Joust. They made the top 4 in the June Joust. That's a pretty impressive thing to do. They also didn't win a single map in the June Joust. They seem like a team that kind of got into the tournament as a fluke. They barely made it into the regional knockouts because, of course, the Fusion lost to the Valiant, or lost a map to the Valiant. And because of that, they gave the NYXL a chance. Spark maybe weren't preparing for the NYXL, didn't expect the NYXL. NYXL were able to get that win over the Spark, which is okay, but it's not as good as maybe people had thought it was at the moment. And then the NYXL got pretty easily dismantled during the June Joust itself. So I think they're a difficult team to place. I think this team has talent. I think the DPS line especially has looked very good. Flora and Feather impressed me this entire month. Whenever we get to see Guangbong and Ivy, I still think those are two players playing at a very high level. Ivy, of course, has history at the Overwatch League, so that's no real surprise. The biggest concern with this team is always going to be the tank line. Yakpung and Bianca have not really been the most reliable duo. Bianca, I think, a little more so than Yakpung, but Yakpung has some very inconsistent games. And it's very difficult to do well when you have a very inconsistent main tank. When Yakpung plays well, I think the NYXL are a good team, but he's not a player who's going to outclass many main tanks. And when I think of the really strong main tanks in the league, Yakpung doesn't really fall close to that list. And so while there are days where Jonak and Friday are able to really pop off, and that enables Yakpung and Bianca a little bit more, it's not always enough to help overcome some of the mistakes and issues that we see from this tank line. And so despite their good June Joust run, they fall here in the 15 spot. At the number 14 spot, I have the Chengdu Hunters. This is the area on this list where I'm feeling a little less confident in all of my placements. I would say 15 through 11. It's pretty unclear where some of these teams lie, but I gave Chengdu the edge over New York for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think Chengdu, despite the fact that they had a less than stellar June Joust, I still think they've shown more consistency. They've shown a better ability to compete with the best teams in the league, right? They've beaten the likes of the Shanghai Dragons. They've beaten the likes of the Philadelphia Fusion. They've beaten the likes of the Seoul Dynasty. New York, of those three, has only beaten the Philadelphia Fusion. And so Chengdu has shown more consistency. They've shown an ability to play more looks, more compositions, more meta-based things. I think that Gaga has looked very good as opposed to Yakpung. I don't think has looked very good. And I just think the Chengdu Hunters have shown that they have a lot of talent and just don't necessarily know where to utilize that talent best. My problems with the Chengdu Hunters come from kind of those issues of maybe too many cooks in the kitchen, some weird roster decisions. They ran Kaneki a couple times this past weekend, or their last weekend they played, which I thought was a little bit odd. I wasn't too sure why they went with that route. They didn't play Jimmy in that series, if I recall correctly. It was a weird set of events from the Chengdu Hunters at times. So I'm not sure exactly what they're doing at all times, but I think they have shown still a lot of potential despite the difficulties they faced in the June Joust. And that is enough for me to put them here at 14. At number 13, I have the Boston Uprising. This is a team that has actually very much improved over the past month. They got 2 big wins in the first weekend of the June Joust qualifiers, beating the Washington Justice and beating the Toronto Defiant. The Defiant struggled a lot down the stretch. The Justice had a bad opening weekend, but the Uprising were able to take advantage of both of those opportunities, and they seized them. Where their problems came in were their second weekend of matches. They lost a 3-2 series to the Paris Eternal. They then lost pretty handily to the LA Gladiators and the Atlanta Reign, 2 teams who we would largely consider to be mid to upper level teams in the Overwatch League's North American region. So while we have seen improvements from Boston, I think that they are a team that has definitely flourished now that they do not have to run Valentine on the Tracer. I think that that has helped them immensely. I think they should, just like the Toronto Defiant, invest in another DPS player. It's very clear this team wants to go predominantly Korean, as they obviously have Gable Shi in their roster now, so they don't really need to play Punk. much, if at all. They built this roster now to be predominantly Korean. You need a third Korean DPS. You're not going to get by with just two. We've seen this happen over and over again in times past. I have railed against it numerous times in the past. Get another DPS player. Get a rotation of at least 3. That will help you out. Yes, you have Color Hex. You're not going to play him. We all know you're not going to play him. So that's the big thing that Boston needs to do. But other than that, they look pretty good. They're much improved. I don't think they're going to be juggernauts just yet, but they certainly have the makings for a very talented team. At number 12, I have a pretty big riser, a pretty big surprise, probably for a lot of people, and that is the Paris Eternal. The Eternal look pretty good. 2 pretty major changes to their roster, of course, Neptuno retiring and Dredro coming in to replace him. Then, before their matches to start off the June Joust, or the second weekend of their matches in June Joust, Elivote stepped away to deal with an injury, and they brought in Vestola from British Hurricane. And so what we're looking at here is an Eternal roster that saw a pretty good amount of change and was still able to find very notable success. They looked pretty good against a very good Gladiators team, taking a map off of them, pushing them to potentially even take more maps than that. They also beat a strong Boston Uprising team. The Eternal looked to be on the up, and I think part of that definitely could be the fact that Naga's Echo has been absolutely incredible all season whenever he gets to play it, and Khan is continuing his dominance on that flex support role. He is by far the best Western flex support in the Overwatch League right now, and I think that he is continuing to impress me week in and week out. And we're seeing this team improve week after week. They're gelling more and more every single week. I really like what this Eternal roster is doing. I think Avala did a fantastic job putting this roster together, making a very competitive roster that represents the EU scene. And so for that reason, I have the Paris Eternal here at number 12. The final placement for part 1 of this Power Rankings is the Hangzhou Spark here at number 11. The Spark really had what it took. It seemed to be a better team than this. They were undefeated throughout the June Joust. They didn't drop a single match until they lost to the New York Excelsior in the regional knockouts. And that left a very sour taste in my mouth. Now, I don't think it's something the Spark can't overcome. I think they still look very good. I think they've still shown a grasp on numerous different metas. Gushui is a main tank that can play pretty much anything that you need him to play, and he will do just fine. I don't have any concerns in my life in regards to Gushui. I think Gushui is a fantastic player, but there are clearly some adaptation issues, potential coaching issues that have stemmed from changes they've made early in the season to their coaching staff. And so I do have some slight concerns about this Spark roster's longevity and whether or not they will be able to continue the success they found in the June Joust going forward based on what we've seen. But Shai is very good, and as long as he's given the opportunities to really pop off and really do what he can, I think this Spark roster should be able to find the opportunities that they are looking for. It'll be tough. The APAC region has some pretty good teams, but ultimately, if the Spark can start turning stuff around, they do have what it takes to be one of the best teams in that APAC region. That is it for the first part of my Overwatch League 2021 mid-season power rankings. Part 2 will be out on Friday, so keep your eyes out for that. But I would love to hear from you and your thoughts on my power ranking, your own power rankings. I'd love to hear anything like that. Comment down below. Let's have a nice discussion about it. But that's all from me for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. I'm going to get out of here. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.